2 days before Michael Jackson died, Janet saw him at a family party. They said goodbye the way they always did. "I love you," she said. "I love you too, Dunk," he said. And then he was gone. Dunk. The nickname Michael gave his baby sister when she was a child because he said she looked like a donkey. He called her that for 40 years. Through the chart battles and the Grammy losses and the 2 years they didn't speak, and the Super Bowl, and the trial, and everything that came between them, and everything that held them together. The last thing Michael Jackson ever said to his baby sister was her childhood nickname. But the most shocking part, you still haven't heard it. To understand Michael and Janet Jackson, you have to go back to Gary, Indiana, back to a family where performing was not a choice, but a condition of existence, where a father conducted rehearsals with a belt in hand, where the difference between a mistake and a punishment was the same as the difference between a note played right and a note played wrong. Michael Jackson was the star. From the moment he stepped on a stage at age 5, there was never any question about that. He had the voice, the movement, the specific magnetism that made audiences lose their minds. By the time Janet was old enough to understand what was happening around her, her brothers were already household names, their faces on the covers of magazines, their songs on every radio. Janet grew up watching all of this from the inside. She was the baby, the last of 9 children. And when the family moved to Los Angeles and the machine of the Jackson 5 took over everything, Janet was simply there, too young to perform with them, too famous by association to be ordinary, too much a Jackson to escape what that name carried. She watched Michael the way only a younger sibling can watch an older one, with a mixture of love and envy so intertwined she couldn't always tell them apart. When Michael had Thriller, I said, "God, I wish that were me," she told an interviewer. "I was so happy for him, but I'd love to break his record." She meant it, both parts. And now everything changed. At home, when Michael was there, they were inseparable. Both inherently shy, both sensitive, both bonded over their love of animals. Janet wanted to be a horse racing jockey before her father pushed her toward entertainment. They would tape old Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers musicals, put all the dance numbers on one tape, and spend hours learning the routines, using the reflection in the sliding glass door as their mirror. Michael was Fred. Janet was Ginger. But there was something else that defined their domestic relationship that almost no one talks about. Janet cleaned Michael's room. Michael Jackson, 8 years older than his baby sister, already the most famous teenager in America, had his laundry done by Janet. She shopped for him. She cleaned his room. When their mother left town, Catherine would say, "I'm leaving you in charge. Take care of Michael." The most famous person in the world being looked after by his 15-year-old sister. That detail tells you everything about what their relationship actually was. Not icon and fan, not superstar and admirer, brother and sister. The ordinary, unglamorous, specific reality of two people who grew up in the same house and knew each other in all the ways that fame could never reach. Wait, don't miss this detail. When Janet decided to make her own name in music, she made a specific decision that almost no one understood at the time. She would not use Michael's people, not Quincy Jones, not Michael's producers, not his collaborators, not anyone connected to the machine that had made him what he was. The reason I wouldn't choose Quincy is because I feel like that's my brothers and they belong together, she said. I didn't want any of my brothers or sisters to have anything to do with it because I wanted to know that the public were going to accept this album for me. Not because my brother wrote this song or produced this one. She went to Minneapolis, to Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, Prince's former producers. Far from Hollywood, far from Joe Jackson, far from the shadow. Joe Jackson's only instruction: don't make her sound like Prince. What emerged was Control, 5 top 5 singles, Janet's first #1 album. The moment the world understood that this was not Michael's sister trying to be Michael, this was someone else entirely. Michael's reaction was complicated. He was proud of her. He said so publicly. He spent hours dancing freestyle to her tracks, according to people close to him. But he was also watching the same charts she was watching, measuring the same distances. You still haven't seen the biggest surprise. The Grammy. In 1990, Janet Jackson won the Grammy for Best Long-Form Music Video for Rhythm Nation 1814. She beat Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. I was shocked. I was surprised. I was happy, she said when asked about it. I bet he's not happy about you starting to knock his records off, the interviewer said. Well, that we don't talk about, Janet replied. That is the whole relationship in 4 words, that we don't talk about. Because Michael was also competitive, because he also wanted to win, because somewhere in the specific love between these two people was the uncomfortable awareness that they were both reaching for the same thing, the same audiences, the same awards, the same validation. And there was only so much of it to go around. But when it mattered, they showed up for each other in ways that the competition could never erase. I can't believe this either, but keep watching. In 1993, the allegations against Michael erupted. The world descended on him with the specific ferocity it reserves for the famous when they fall. And Janet, who was in the middle of her own world tour, reached out immediately. She offered to postpone her tour, to join him, to stand beside him publicly. He's so hurt, she told the press. He loves children, and he would never do anything like that, ever. She said it plainly, without qualification, at a moment when almost everyone else was calculating their distance. This was not the Janet who hadn't spoken to him for 2 years. This was not the Janet who said she didn't want to ride on his coattails. This was the girl who cleaned his room, the one who had been told, "I'm leaving you in charge. Take care of Michael." She took care of him. And when it came time to make Scream, Michael's furious, anguished response to everything that had been done to him, he asked Janet to do it with him. He told her what he needed. With all these things that have gone on in my life, I need to release some anger. She understood. She had watched him carry that anger for years. She agreed. They recorded in New York and Minneapolis with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, the same producers who had made Janet a star by taking her to Minneapolis and keeping Joe Jackson out of the room. Now, those same producers were helping Michael and Janet make the most expensive music video in history, a furious black and white duet that was also a public statement, a legal response, and a piece of art. Michael and Janet in a spaceship, screaming at the world that had decided to consume them. That was their collaboration, the only one they ever made. And it was not about two siblings performing together. It was about two people who had grown up in the same impossible circumstances, who understood each other's specific wounds, who found in a recording studio the space to say the things they couldn't say anywhere else. And here's the thing no one ever talks about. After Scream, they didn't speak for nearly 2 years. Janet has been careful about what she has said publicly about this period. She declined to explain it in detail. There was no animosity, she said. He didn't return a couple of calls. It's no big thing. But somewhere in the specifics of their relationship, the Grammy she won over him, the contracts she signed that outpaced his, the parallel careers that could never quite be parallel because they were always being compared. Something cooled. Something that couldn't fully be explained by tour schedules or busy lives. An interviewer once asked her simply, "When was the last time you talked to Michael?" "It'll be 2 years in December," she said. Just like that. 2 years. Ask yourself what it costs a relationship to go 2 years without a phone call. What accumulates in that silence? What gets decided and undecided and decided again in the space between two people who grew up in the same house and chose not to pick up the phone? This is what no headline ever captured. Because when Michael needed her at the 2005 trial, sitting in a Santa Maria courthouse facing 14 counts of child molestation, Janet was there. She showed up in all white, the family in all white, a visual statement of innocence and solidarity that said, whatever has been between us, whatever calls weren't returned, we are still the same family. She watched the verdicts come in, not guilty, not guilty, 14 times. "He's completely innocent," she had said. "It's very stupid. It's very ignorant what's going on." And when he died, when she got the call at her house in New York that her brother had collapsed, when she called her mother and Tito and LaToya, and they were all heading to the hospital, when she finally heard the words he had passed, she couldn't believe it. "It felt like a dream," she said. "It still to this day is so difficult for me to believe." She didn't cry at first. She held everyone else together. She was the one who stayed strong at the memorial, who held Paris after her speech, who stood at the MTV Video Music Awards and performed Scream while Michael appeared on the screen behind her. "I never had that moment to cry about his death," she said afterward. "I was just trying to hold it all together. I was trying to shield the pain." Now everything you've seen so far means nothing, because there is a specific detail about the last time Janet saw her brother that contains the whole story of what they were to each other. It was at a family party, a surprise party Janet organized for their parents. The whole family was there, and at the end of the night, they said goodbye. "I love you," she said. "I love you too, Dunk," he said. Dunk, the name he gave her when she was a child because he said she looked like a donkey. The name that stuck through every album and every Grammy and every chart battle and every argument and every silence and every trial and every moment when being a Jackson cost more than it gave. The name he still used the last time he saw her. Ask yourself what it means that the king of pop's last words to its baby sister were a childhood nickname he coined by teasing her. That after everything, after the fame and the competition and the money and the silence and the grief, what remained was this: a private language that belonged only to them. A name that no manager or publicist or journalist or jury ever knew. Just Michael and his little sister, the way they had always been at home, before any of it mattered. She still hasn't watched This Is It. Not yet, she says. She spent one night watching all his videos, listening to all his music. There were moments that made her cry and moments that made her laugh. "I needed that," she said. But the film where he is alive and rehearsing and working and being the version of himself that nobody got to keep, she can't watch that yet. "The morning continues," she wrote. It does. And somewhere in that morning is the specific grief of a person who spent 40 years competing with and loving the same human being, who cleaned his room and broke his records and refused to answer his calls, and stood beside him in a courtroom and held his daughter at his memorial, and who heard, the last time she saw him, the name he gave her when they were children. Dunk. He knew. Whatever else was between them, all of it, he knew she was still there. And so did she. There is something about the specific nature of sibling competition that outside observers almost never fully understand. It is not the same as professional rivalry. It is not the same as the Michael and Prince dynamic. Two people from different families, different cities, different worlds who happen to occupy the same era. Sibling competition is something more intimate and more corrosive and more permanent, because you cannot separate the competitor from the person who loved you first. Janet Jackson understood this better than almost anyone. Think about what it means to watch your brother become the most famous person on earth and feel, simultaneously, the purest pride and the most private envy. To be genuinely happy for him and to lie awake wondering why it couldn't be you. To say to an interviewer, completely honestly, "When Michael had Thriller, I said, 'God, I wish that were me.'" And to also mean every word of the praise she gave him in the same breath. That is not hypocrisy. That is what it actually feels like to love someone who is also your competition. The feeling does not resolve. You do not pick one or the other. You carry both simultaneously for your entire life, and you find the language for it wherever you can. For Janet, the language was music, control, Rhythm Nation, the Grammy she won over his Smooth Criminal. Each one a statement that said, I am here, not because of him, because of me. And Michael understood it completely, because he had done the same thing with his father and his brothers, built a self that was unmistakably his own, separate from the family machine that had created him. He had gone to Neverland. He had become something nobody could share or claim. He knew what it cost. Think about what it means that Michael spent hours dancing freestyle to Janet's records, not watching them, not admiring them from a distance, dancing to them, in private, alone, finding in his baby sister's music something that moved him the way only the best music can, and never quite being able to say it to her directly. That is the Jackson way. Things felt deeply, expressed obliquely, communicated in music and in nicknames, and in the fact that you still call someone Dunk 40 years after you coined it. The Super Bowl changed something between them that has never been fully discussed. On February 1st, 2004, Janet Jackson performed at the Super Bowl halftime show. What happened in the final seconds of her performance with Justin Timberlake became one of the most discussed moments in television history. Her breast was exposed on live television to 90 million Americans. Justin Timberlake walked away largely unscathed. Janet was blacklisted, her music shadow banned on MTV and radio stations across the country, and her brother Michael, whose own trial was approaching, was asked about it in an interview with Geraldo Rivera. He said he had watched the performance. He claimed he never saw anything at first. He agreed with Rivera that the whole thing was overblown. He did not defend her the way she had defended him in 1993. He did not say what she had said about him. He's completely innocent. It's very stupid. It's very ignorant what's going on. He said he didn't see anything. Ask yourself what that moment cost Janet. Not publicly. She never said anything publicly about Michael's response. But privately, in the accounting that happens between siblings, in the ledger of who showed up for whom and when and how, that moment is in there. Janet had defended Michael loudly and repeatedly, at personal and professional cost, through every accusation and every headline. And when the moment came, Michael said he didn't see anything. She never addressed it publicly. She moved on. She showed up at his trial in all white. She held his daughter at his memorial. Because that is what you do when someone is your brother. You absorb the disappointments. You keep showing up. You take care of Michael because that is what you were told to do. And somewhere in the process, it became something you chose rather than something you were assigned. Ask yourself what it means that Janet, after all of it, after the Grammy that beat his, after the 2 years of silence, after the Super Bowl and his non-defense, after the trial and the memorial and the grief, still said in a recent interview when asked about her brother, "He's the greatest there is, greatest of all time. Not was, is, present tense." Because for Janet, Michael Jackson never became past tense. He is still there, still calling her Dunk, still dancing freestyle to her records in some private room she will never see but has always known about. Ask yourself what it means to love someone that way, to compete with them and forgive them and lose them and carry them for the rest of your life, still in present tense, still the most present absence in every room you enter. The mourning continues. It always will. Because the last thing he ever said to her was her name, the private one, the one that was only his, the one he gave her when they were children, long before any of this mattered. And that name is still there, still hers, still the last word. Dunk. He loved her. She knew.